I'm looking at the game between Alexander Donchenko and Alireza Firouzja from round 6 of the Tata Steel tournament. This is a mad game. I think you're going to enjoy this. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting us via Patreon or PayPal down there. Okay, here we go. So Donchenko with white. Now he's struggling in the tournament. And I know what happens in these round-robin events when one player looks like they're the lame impala, then, well, the big beasts start to sniff blood and they go for them. So here we go. Alireza already playing something a little bit unusual, playing this bishop out at an early stage. And very quickly we actually transpose into, well, a pretty well-known line called the Notenboom variation, named after a Dutch player, Daniel Notenboom, who died at a very young age. But he gave his name to this variation, which is already, really crazy at this moment. Basically, black gets these 2 pawns on the queen side. Now at the moment they're not advancing, but obviously there is potential there. As compensation, white has a beautiful pawn centre and these 2 wonderful bishops. And this position, after 14 moves, is really the starting point of this Notenboom variation. And there have been hundreds and hundreds of games played from this exact position. And, very strong players have played this. Well, fairly recently, Giri and Nakamura have played this with black, for example. It's a absolutely fascinating position. I feel totally in 2 minds about this. I feel like Gollum, actually. I'm looking at one side and I kind of go, wow, those pawns look amazing. If we could get in A4, then they're just going to stomp home. And then the other half of my mind goes, oh, wow, I love those bishops. I love the centre. If things could open up and those bishops could scream across the board, doesn't that look fantastic for white? So I don't know. I've never played this position with either colour. I find it too scary. But it's no surprise to me that Alireza wants to play something as sharp as this with black. He can see that Donchenko is the weak, as I said, the lame impala in the tournament. So at this moment, well, both players playing reasonably quickly. And Donchenko played knight d2, which is actually the most popular move in this position. So he's still familiar with this line. As I said, this is really the starting point of this variation. And here, queen c7 is actually the most popular move, but Alireza plays e5. And I have to say, I like this move with black. Basically, we're confronting those pawns and trying to break them up. We're hoping that white will perhaps play d5, and that will give that beautiful c5 square for the knight, which in turn looks at those squares, which could help to push those pawns forward. And, well, certainly that pawn can't be taken, because then the queen looks at the bishop, those pawns have been split up, looks nice for black. So that just kind of increases the tension in this position as well. And of course, white always has to watch out for this exchange, which could mean after this exchange, you never know when that queen could look down on h2 and knight g4 might come. So bishop c2 was played in the last move, which looks logical, so that white can potentially blockade on a4. h3, and I think that's directed against this potential attacking idea with knight g4 later. And okay, that's reasonable. So this is a really tense position. White is holding those central pawns in the same positions for the moment so that all these squares are controlled, not allowing those knights into the position. Yeah, I mean, here, let me just give another example. You know, we would very much like to push this one forward to give this knight a square on c4, but this would allow black to blockade with a knight on d5 or possibly the bishop as well. And those pawns are going nowhere, and yeah, that would be very nice. So there's real tension in the position. Neither side wanting to sort of commit at the moment. And here h6 from Alireza, so another very careful move, just holding the tension in the middle at the moment. And now Donchenko starts to force things. Knight f3. So he wants to induce this exchange on d4. But Alireza isn't playing along with that. Rook a6. Now that's a very interesting move because sometimes that rook might swing across to the king side, and sometimes it might be useful to put some power behind the a pawn as well. And here Donchenko commits. He decides to take on e5. I'm not sure it's a good move, actually. There's something about it that looks very dodgy to me, because this knight is going to hit c5. That rook has potential to come to g6. Well, I understand what Donchenko was doing. First of all, he's won a pawn, and he wants to get these pawns flying down the board. And, you know, he's looking to use those bishops behind those pawns and get going on the king side. But it looks very risky to me. Knight c5 played, yeah, and still that rook has real potential to come here in combination with that bishop. So the bishop ducks back to c2. That's pointing in the right direction. But now a4, those pawns starting to roll. And at this moment, you sort of start to think, wow, looks fantastic for black. But actually, it's not that clear. Oh, let's just clear up a tactic. First of all, of course, if that pawn is taken, then there is a massive tactic. Queen c6 threatens mate on g2 and the rook, so let's not go there. f5 played instead by Donchenko, and although these pawns are incredibly impressive, so are white's pawns with the bishops behind them. And here, well, my computer likes rook d8, followed by plonking the rook down on d2. Yeah, it doesn't look bad. Rook f2. But, I mean, white can hang on here anyway. Those pawns aren't actually rolling automatically. In any case, b3 was played by black. And that put the bishop back on b1, which certainly doesn't look bad. And here, again, I'll let you know what the computer recommends here, which is pawn to a3. But this simply leads to liquidation. After this, pieces get exchanged. That b pawn is no longer very dangerous when it's just on its own. White is still a pawn up, but, well, it should end in a draw, of course. That pawn on b3 will provide enough counterplay. But that's not why Alireza played this opening. He doesn't want to liquidate. He wants to keep the tension. And now he realised, well, that rook is no longer so effective on the 6th rank. So he put the rook back on a8. And now e6. So it looks as though the initiative has swung over to white now. If pawn takes pawn, then f6, and that is catastrophic. Those bishops look amazing. f7 threatened, pawn takes pawn threatened, queen g4 threatened. White will be winning. So how exactly should one deal with pawn to e6? Queen g3 played, threatening queen g2 mate. Well, that's not bad. But queen e2 is the best move here. but rook f2 played. And now f6, so that closes the king side to a certain extent. I think it's a practical move. Blocks off that bishop. Now the f-pawn is blockaded, then blocks off the b1 bishop as well. Okay, the downside is that there's a protected pass pawn on e6. Nevertheless, I think f6 has to be a good move. In fact, well, it was possible to take here. And that should give black the advantage. But this is all terribly theoretical. I mean, f6 looks like a very practical move to me. Bishop d4. Now it's possible simply to defend the knight, but no, the knight went in. And it doesn't look bad. Looking at the rook, looking at various sensitive squares in the position, white should play rook f3 here, and it's, well, all bets are off basically. But Donchenko lost his nerve and took that knight off, and this really kind of clears the position from black's viewpoint. That bishop is so powerful, looking in both directions, and it's very hard for white to relieve the pressure on the position now. And that bishop also looks at f5 as well. It could just be that pawn on f5 will drop, then the pawn on e6 drops. Rook a3 played, obviously a very passive position. And things are starting to look very nice for black. And inevitably the players, of course, were running short of time. Donchenko running shorter than Firouzja. And this next move is very cool. Reminds me of Grandelius's game from yesterday and many other games. Okay, how would you play with black here? Black to play. I'll have a little slurp of tea. You have a little think. Okay, the clue from Niels Grandelius yesterday. He played king h2. Firouzja played king h7. I like this. Just tucking the king out of the way, completely safe on h7. Gets it off the back rank. No surprises on this diagonal. And it means that basically black is going to play with a free hand. Firouzja, of course, is a specialist in blitz. And that's the kind of move you make in a blitz game. It's a very practical move. He understands his king is safer than white's. And when things get down to the wire and you're just playing on instinct, that can count in your favour. Queen d2 played. And here, actually, if black just holds the position, it's very nice. Bishop c6, and so that holds the a-pawn, then maybe rook b8 to support the b-pawn. It's not just the queenside pawns that look good. There are various ways into white's position. It could be that at some moment, let's just get the paint off the board, that there's an exchange sack and the queen swoops across to the queen side. It looks tremendous. But instead, Firouzja played b2. And this is a 50-50 move. How would you capture that pawn? You're short of time. Bishop or queen? In fact, bishop takes is the best move. And this looks really scary. But this is the key move that probably Donchenko overlooked. Queen b4 attacks rook and bishop. And basically white can survive this position. This is not at all obvious, of course. Black is the exchange up, but actually this pin is very annoying. There you go, I said the king was completely safe on h7. Well, in fact, this pin is very annoying. The rook is attacked as well. And after this, well, basically, yeah, you've got to watch this pawn too. So after this, well, the game will probably end in a draw. So coming back here, Yeah, it's hard to believe, but basically bishop takes b2 was the move. Instead, queen takes b2 was played, and this costs the game because suddenly black finds a way in. That rook gets into white's position. And rook number 2 connects. And yeah, split rooks basically. Black manages to get to the first rank and it is all over. So this is what happened. White's king is just flushed out into the middle. And here, queen b8, the queen cuts back. Ready to check on b5. And here, basically, it's forced. There's no way out for white. Of course, rook c3 would allow queen b2 check. And this is how the game ended. Here, queen c1 and queen f1 check. That was the final move of the game. Let's just see, well, a couple more moves. King d4 check, and, well, basically mate follows shortly. So Alireza Firouzja gambled, but it paid off. Really tense game. As he said afterwards, we were both in time trouble and he made the final mistake. Yeah, it had that feel about it. You know, Donchenko actually played in, well, in the right spirit, you know, very adventurously. He risked a lot when he took on e5 here. A very risky move. It looks good for black for a moment, but actually he did find enough play here, and was actually doing pretty well. But yeah, Alireza gambled and did well. So there's now a clump of players on 3.5 out of 6, but actually Niels Grandelius is still leading the tournament with 4 out of 6. He managed to hold Caruana today in a really long game. So anyway, we're not even halfway through the tournament yet. We've had 6 rounds. Let's see what happens. Thanks for watching.